Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Debrief Podcast. I'm Josh Durso, joined by my co-host Jackie Augustine. It's Wednesday, March 22nd, and we're talking politics like we always do.
Yes.
Jackie, how's it going?
Things are going well. Happy spring.
Right. It doesn't feel like spring out there, but sure, I'll go with you on
yet.
that one. So, opening thoughts for today's podcast. Do you have any off the top of your head? Because I got one thing that's really burning me right now.
Well, then why don't you start and I can react to that.
So, village elections were yesterday, and we're going to talk about one of those village elections in a little bit. But turnout, voter turnout, is depressing.
Yeah, it is depressing.
So I was going through the numbers. We had our election coverage like we always do, and seeing candidates, elected officials now, win with 20 votes, with 30 votes, with 50 votes even, or 80 votes. You talk about wanting to avoid this sort of like small group of people making decisions, but when you have a community that's that unwilling to go out and take a stand and make a vote, right, or even it doesn't take that much time, that to me is just completely opposite of our system.
Yeah, it seems more like a middle school vote for class president than an actual local election with real financial and policy implications. Yeah,
real implications. And that's when you're talking about a village, I feel like that's what it all comes down to, because it's like a village, this is where, according to the state and according to a lot of people, this is where the greatest expense is, or this is where the greatest opportunity to eliminate expense is. And my God, if people care, they aren't showing it.
No, I mean, people will complain all the livelong day about how their taxes are too high and they're not going to the right things. And then when they have the opportunity to impact those things directly by selecting people who have an agenda that maybe they think is fiscally responsible or preventing someone they think is irresponsible, yeah, I guess they have better things to do. I don't understand it.
And for a long time I thought, well, maybe it's the polling times. Like, they aren't open as long. It's always like a 12 to 9 thing usually. Yeah. But honestly, 12 to 9, that's a pretty big window.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody who says, I would have voted if I could have gone at 6 a.m., but since it didn't open till noon, I guess I'd stay home. Yeah, I don't think that has. I mean, I would love to see the hours longer, but then again, it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing, because do you keep longer hours? How do you justify the expense of running an election with long voting hours if you've got 80 people showing up? Because that doesn't really, I mean, it seems like shorter hours make sense if that's your turnout, but then maybe you'd get bigger turnout if you had more hours. I don't know. So yeah,
there you go. There's one of the things that I wanted to say before we jump off of this. It's funny. You think about 20 people coming out to vote. It was either Interlaken or Ovid, one of the two.
Oh boy.
So you're there for 9 hours. Imagine you're one of these workers. You're there
right.
for 9 hours, and 20 people show up, 30 people show up.
Right.
My God, you're seeing like 2 people an hour, 3 people an hour maybe?
It's got to be demoralizing. I mean, this is, especially in this political climate, like, I think people get so focused on what's going on at the federal level, and they forget that the local stuff, I mean, it goes, not only does the stuff at the federal level impact local government, but what do you think is the training ground of federal policy? I mean, it's the local level. People who are running for local office now might then run for a county office or a state office or a national office. I mean, our elected officials took those paths from local government up. And right. To think that people's careers could get jump-started by 20 votes, and then next thing you know, maybe they're a senator.
That's lofty. But I'm going to say that, there are probably a lot of reasons that it's happening, but it's just from the community engagement side.
Yeah,
it's really disappointing to see that kind of, that's my rant. That's my opening rant for the day.
Well, it's a good one. It's well justified anger there.
So, what's the thing that's been bothering you over the last 2 weeks since we were here last? Or is there nothing bothering you? Are you happy?
Oh. What an existential question to be asking me, the philosopher. No. Am I happy with the stuff that's going on lately? No. But I think we'll probably talk about a lot of the things I'm unhappy with during the course of the show.
Yep.
But I do think this healthcare thing, we're starting to really see the deal-making surface, and that's what bothers me, because a lot of people I talked to who said, well, the reason to vote for Trump is because he's going to do things differently, and he's not going to do the same old, and he's really going to shake things up. When it comes down to it, we are seeing a bill get pushed through quickly with a bunch of pieces to appease different people, which is exactly what the Democrats did. And I'm thinking, well, where's the outrage? Where are all the people that were upset before? So it shouldn't matter what party it is. It's either good policy or it's not. So it's frustrating to me to see all the people who are hypocrites kind of emerge that would have complained to no end if things were happening this way before. And I complained, and now I'm complaining, and people say, well, that's just because it's the Republicans. Nope, I'm an equal opportunity complainer when it comes to process issues. So I wish there were more people on the other side of the aisle that would join my ranks and be equal opportunity complainers. But
I'm going to join you in equal opportunity complaining on that subject when we get to it here in a little while.
Okay.
Because there is a lot in that's a little bit confusing, I guess.
Yeah.
So our first big story of the week, the shakeup in Waterloo. Now, I want to put a disclaimer on this. Absentee ballots still have to be counted.
Okay.
But at this point, at this moment, longtime Waterloo Village trustee Dave Dupre has lost, or what news outlets, the Times, us, a few others, have called the race. He's down 18 votes. John Butlack, a Republican, came out of the woodwork and really must have done a lot of things right along the way to get to his 250 mark, which I'm cheering 250 votes because that's really impressive. But it goes 250, 213, and then 195. Gina Suffredini, another incumbent Democrat, she will, if things hold to the rank that they're in right now, she will retain her seat. But Dave Dupre, he's been on the board since 1996. It's a long time.
Yeah.
That is a long time. And I almost wonder, watching this play out, there was a story in the Times that came out last week surrounding the village's Facebook page and whether it was misused or not. Mm-hmm. I don't. Someone asked me today if they thought that was, or if I thought that was the item that pushed him over the edge and sort of killed it for him. Yeah. I don't think so. I think what we're seeing right now is, it's almost like outsiders are better than the people who have been doing the job for a long time, or at least that's the perception among a lot of voters right now. So I think it might have just been bad timing.
Yeah, that could be it. I mean, I'm certainly sensitive to losing an election by a close margin like that, so I feel for him. But yeah, I do think there is some of that. That kind of makes me nervous because I do agree that it's just because someone's in the office doesn't mean they should stay in the office.
Right.
People always have to prove that they're actually sensible and doing the right thing. However, I don't always think that someone new is automatically the right choice, because overall you do need a little bit of institutional memory in your governing bodies.
Right.
And if that goes away, that can end up being very difficult. Things can get done that shouldn't be done if nobody remembers why they didn't do those things in the first place. But also, governing, I believe in democracy, and I feel that everybody should have the opportunity to run and participate, and I would encourage people to do that. But I also don't want to equate that with the idea that anybody can govern, because it does take a certain temperament and disposition, and it's not so much, it's not about knowledge or training or anything like that. It's really about kind of open-mindedness. So I think sometimes what you see is that an outsider is viewed as being more willing to look at things from a new and fresh perspective, but I don't always find that to be the case. And I don't mean to comment specifically on the Waterloo case because I don't know. I don't know the candidate who won. But I'm just saying sometimes it makes me nervous when people feel like, yeah, we need a breath of fresh air. Well, yeah, you also need a qualified breath of fresh air, right? Like you need to make sure the people that you're bringing in, you're not just ousting people because they've been there for a while. It's got to be because you don't agree and you think there's a better way to do it. And I just hope, I hope that was what people were thinking and it wasn't just, oh, time for someone new.
Well, I'll say this. Reading a lot of the comments, we've posted a few stories over the last month and a half on this race on fingerlicks1.com, and a lot of the comments were sort of, we need change, get the people who have been in there out, we need change. That's why I say I don't think it was any particular thing. He probably didn't do anything different this time around in terms of campaigning. I doubt he did anything different in terms of how he sort of governed or how he ruled on things in the last several months leading up to this. It's just one of those, that's why I say it. I almost feel like in my gut it comes down to timing.
Yeah, that could be.
But yeah, we'll see. Obviously, there are still, I want to reiterate this, there are 44 absentee ballots to count, and that is enough to sway him ahead of Suffredini and possibly preserve his status on the village board. We'll be talking about this again in a couple weeks, I'm sure.
The absentee ballot counting is always a nail biter.
Stressful. Yeah, they're doing it next Tuesday. So Tuesday at 10 a.m., they're going to go through the process of counting those ballots, and I'm sure there will be a few people in attendance to see how that exactly unfolds. Maybe the biggest surprise, if that isn't the biggest surprise, this next item is the biggest surprise. Preet Bharara out.
Very upset about this one.
Out. So I'm going to let you take the lead on this one and sort of talk about how it unfolded and how you experienced it, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so Preet Bharara, I thought by all accounts, regardless of what party people find themselves in or none of the above, is like the superstar for New York State. Like any concerned citizen who was worried about government corruption and all these ethics scandals must have loved this guy. I have this personal affinity for him. I just feel like he's doing the right thing. He's going after everybody. Again, equal opportunity, kind of, not that he's complaining, but prosecutor,
Right, yeah.
And he has really taken up the hard work of cleaning stuff up, and he's been really successful at doing that, and just seemed to have kind of impeccable credentials and character, and just said, I'm here to enforce the law. Things are out of control. I'm going to fix it. So I was really optimistic, like, oh, this is a great thing for New York State. We're finally going to root out some of this corruption that everybody's known has been going on. And so after the election, I think there was some nervousness because he was a holdover from the Obama administration, right? So new administration, sometimes you wonder. But news reports said he went and met with Trump. Trump thought, yeah, what you're doing is great.
Verified, not fake news.
Right.
The real deal.
Right. Real news. He said, that he thought that these convictions had been great, that his work was really wonderful. He has nothing to worry about. Keep on keeping on. In fact, he said, like, this work, keep doing it. So then all of a sudden, the Trump administration decides to just fire everybody. Well, ask for their resignations. So I think this was March
46 of them went down.
Right. So Bharara's like, forget it. I've got work to do. I'm not resigning. This is an important job. There's cases still in the works. You can't remove me right in the middle of some of this big stuff, including an investigation of de Blasio, right? So again, it doesn't make a lot of sense from a partisan perspective. Well, then Assemblyman Kolb, our own assemblyman and the minority leader, tweeted or issued a statement. I'm not on Twitter. Let me tell you, Preet Bharara and his tweets make me want to join Twitter. But but anyway, so Assemblyman Kolb came out and said, yeah, we stand with him. He's doing great work. There's more to be done cleaning up New York State. So I thought, well, good. Maybe Trump and Jeff Sessions, they're going to come out and say, well, this was a mistake. We're going to make an exception for him because he's doing this good work and he refuses to resign. So, okay. Nope. They fired him.
Right.
And, now it comes out that maybe the reason he's fired is because he has this corruption case going. Well, first, he's got a corruption case against some Russian officials. Mm-hmm. That's got an interesting twist because the key witness that was supposed to testify tomorrow just fell out a fourth-story window in Moscow and is in guarded condition in the hospital. Interesting. But also now, Bharara's top prosecutor has been picked up by the Attorney General, Schneiderman, by his office, who's in the middle of a probe against Trump. So there's all kinds of interesting stuff going on here. Mm-hmm. But losing Bharara, he's going to go teach now at NYU. He's going to be their scholar in residence. But, boy, I just think that shouldn't have happened.
Right. So it's not unusual for that to happen, for the sort of cleaning of the slate to happen. I get that.
Right.
But I feel like you said, he was the incorruptible force in New York State, right? So
right.
It's a huge loss. My thought is, the only way that this can possibly have a positive outcome is if he runs for governor. And this was the only thing that, they say that all of his cases, all of the things he was pursuing will be pursued as aggressively as they were under his watch. Yeah. I think that was more him than it was anyone else or his office. Obviously, he has qualified people working under him, or had qualified people working under him, no doubt about that.
Right.
But I feel like this gives him an opportunity. Obviously, he's going to teach now. That's great. But there's more for him in state politics, I feel like, at this point. And honestly, it might be, if he primaried against Cuomo in 18.
Right.
It's 18, I think, yeah. That would be one of the most interesting developments, I feel like, in the last 10 years.
Well, he knows where all the skeletons are, right? So, that'd be a great primary. And look Cuomo almost lost to Zephyr Teachout. Mm-hmm. So if she can mount an effective challenge, given that I would say her candidacy was left of mainstream, right? Mm-hmm. Then, I think Preet Bharara could give him a run for his money. But here's my worry. People get to be so cynical, right? I totally agree that he, incorruptible, could get into state politics and just clean house. I hope that would happen. However, my worry is people are really skeptical of the politician that is there for the right reasons, so I wonder if at the end of the day people would be kind of complacent and say, well, Cuomo's doing all this stuff now. He's doing all this stuff for upstate, so we'll kind of stick with him. I don't know. I'm not quite. I would hate to see him run and to see Preet Bharara run and lose. So I just want him to get his job back, right? Or I want him to become an investigative journalist or, do something where he can get the rest of the story out because there's so much left undone. And he had a tweet. Again, this is why I want to join Twitter. I had to read this stuff secondhand. I'd like to get it when it happens. But he had a tweet that said, "Now I know how the Moreland Commission felt."
Yes.
And I thought, if there was any other way he could have possibly confirmed all of the things the Moreland Commission was trying to do that got stymied, like the LLC loophole that one of these days we will talk about on this show, because I'm so kind of itching to talk about that. But, if that and these income disclosures and these deals now where lobbyists are buying legislators their Florida condos in lieu for particular, for specific votes, I just feel like I would love for him to air the dirty laundry in some way so that we could change it. Although if 20 people are coming out to vote, it's kind of, I wish people were paying closer attention. So yes, I feel like everybody in New York State who isn't corrupt, a corrupt elected official, should be outraged over him being removed from office, because that's a loss.
It's a huge shift, because I feel like he's become as much of a mainstay in the whole political space as the actual political actors themselves.
Right.
And only because of what he's done in the last so many years. And that's to say that, I hope whoever follows him continues to aggressively push against these issues that clearly exist.
Yeah, and I hope in, again, an equal opportunity way. Because sure, there's plenty of corruption on both sides, but it's important to focus on both sides, or
Right.
you'll never get to the bottom of it. The lobbyists will just shift from one to the other.
Ain't that the truth? So, speaking of partisan politics, let's talk healthcare.
Okay.
So the latest proposal,
Right.
I don't even want to call it anything else, because I feel like every half hour there's some sort of minor tweak or change or something happening to it where it doesn't.
Right.
You can't say it's one thing. So the latest proposal would supposedly remove the burden on counties with Medicaid spending.
Right.
So it would essentially take the percentage that counties have to pay, and it would put it back on New York State. Governor Cuomo said it would create a $2+ million shortfall in the state budget. There has been a lot of discussion about this one, and I feel like if you aren't going to modify Medicaid, this is just my 2 cents. If you aren't going to modify Medicaid and reduce it in some way, or reduce the arms and functions of it, you're still going to have the cost. And some way, somehow, New York State's going to find a way to throw that bill on taxpayers.
Yeah.
So maybe the county has less of a burden, but I feel like if something isn't done other than taking the burden off of counties, that it's going to come back somehow.
Yeah, I feel like this little carrot, I guess, to get certain upstate Republicans to vote for the health care bill who they're afraid of losing as part of this Freedom Caucus that wants to vote against it, the Republican Freedom Caucus. So, again, I think too many elected officials take people for fools, and maybe a 20-person voter turnout means they're correct to do so. But I would like to think that we are not foolish enough to believe that simply shifting the cost from the county to the state means we're saving money. Because, like you said, the bill remains the same. It has to be paid for somehow. We are all New York State taxpayers in addition to being county and city and school district taxpayers.
Right.
So shifting the burden from one to the other, and so here's what I think they're thinking. There is a perception in upstate that Medicaid is somehow an urban program. So I think what they're doing is exploiting a particular mindset that somehow Medicaid's a city problem. So if you look at this, I mean, that's what came out at some of these town hall meetings, right? People don't understand. If people actually understood the percentage of people in each county that are on Medicaid, and particularly the number of rural people that are on Medicaid, I don't think there'd be this kind of division. But right now, in this political climate, division is the argument of the day. So by parsing it out into this kind of urban versus rural, we're going to save the rural counties by shifting this to the state to cover the city burden. I think that it's a little bit of magic show that doesn't have any substance behind it. And the details, though, are that New York City is exempted from this. So even people who tend to think that there's this urban-suburban split aren't getting what they're hoping for. And it gives a good talking point for some of the upstate Republicans. But if you actually look at the details, I mean, someone questioned Tom Reed about this at the Manchester Town Hall. This proposal wasn't out yet, but somebody said, well, look at New York State has already opted into expanded Medicaid. If you take away some of that money, who's going to pay for it? New York State taxpayers. So why wouldn't you, as a New York State congressperson, be fighting for more federal aid to help us with our taxes than less? And he said, we understand this. This was part of my problem. We understand this, we being the Republican caucus. But his answer was, and he repeated it again in the paper today when he was unveiling this proposal, the state will get 2 years to adjust. Well, I'm not fooled by that. 2 years puts us past the midterm election when he's up again before we realize that what was promised as a huge savings turns out to just be a shifted cost.
Right.
So I'm all for eliminating unfunded mandates to the counties, but that means the state pays it. And if you exempt New York City, which actually in most cases is carrying the burden for upstate New York in some of these statewide programs as far as contributions, especially with this millionaire's tax that's in the state budget, if you exempt New York City, the bill falls squarely on upstate's shoulders. So in my view, this is a huge miss. I've come up with my miss for the week. It's a mistake. And frankly, I think it's disingenuous and playing on what they're hoping is the ignorance of voters in their districts, which makes me really angry because I feel like they're taking advantage of people. So, yeah, I don't like it.
Right. So I think the interesting caveat is a couple weeks ago I was at a healthcare roundtable here in Seneca Falls. Leslie Diggs-Burke, who ran for Senate last year, was there, and she was speaking about sort of the reduction. And I had County Supervisor Bob Shipley here from Seneca County on my podcast a few weeks back. And in Seneca County, it accounts for 60% of the budget, the unfunded mandates. The Medicaid payment every single week is $112,000 in Seneca County. Diggs-Burke said, in Chemung County, there would be an instant 89% reduction in property taxes in a property tax bill if this was eliminated. In other counties around the area, it was all between 50 and 70%. And I thought to myself, like what you're saying, these numbers are really nice, but these are the numbers that are making people say, oh my God, this is what we need to do.
Right.
But it isn't. And the funny part is I feel like it crosses the party lines. And you hear Democrats say it too, and you hear Republicans say it, and they're all echoing this unfunded mandate.
Yep.
What they aren't expressing, I feel like, adequately is that if you simply remove the unfunded mandate and you remove the mandate period, that is a solution. But if you're just going to take it off of the county, throw it on someone else, and that's the end of it,
right,
that's your idea of solving the problem. New York State will find a way.
Right.
They will collect their money. I've heard income tax increase or something to that effect. It would have to come from somewhere. So obviously.
Yeah. Or a special kind of district type of tax, which is a fancy way of saying unfunded mandate, but it collected a different way.
Right.
I mean, they will get the money one way or the other. And I agree that it's never made sense to me that Medicaid would be a county thing. It's a state. I mean, the state administers the program, so why would the counties actually have to pay for it?
I do believe New York is the only state that does that.
I don't know.
As I understand,
probably.
Bob Shipley was one of the ones who argued that a few weeks back, and I went back and I fact-checked, and I couldn't find another state that did it that way.
So, I mean, I agree that moving it makes sense. However, I thought the reason to move it, to centralize it in the first place, is that gives the state more leverage in getting federal funds and matching funds and tailoring a program that really works well across the state. But again, this bill basically just says, yeah, we're going to move it, but we're not going to give any more money, and we're not going to tailor or change the program in any way. So really, it's just New York State, now you find the money. And to tout that as a savings, I think, just a soundbite. It's
as a break off of this conversation. Would you support, or could you see yourself supporting a significant change to what Medicaid is, like as a function, like if you're removing different parts of it to shrink it down, because ultimately I feel like that's what they're going to have to do. If you're really going to shrink down the cost, I feel like you have to take it apart a little bit. And I don't know I'm not sure if everyone would really be willing to get behind that, right?
Right. Like who are you going to say doesn't deserve health care?
Right.
Well, there are people willing to say that, but I'm not one of them. I think I'm of the opinion that health care is a fundamental right, and I can't understand why the system is so broken that we allow people to make so much money off of it, because any other industry that we determine to be critical to proper functioning of like human existence would not be allowed to have a profit. I mean, look at City of Geneva operates a water and wastewater treatment plant because people need safe, clean drinking water. The city is statutorily prohibited from making a profit on that, right? They can cover their operations, but they're not allowed to run it as its own kind of industry because it's recognized that that would be a harm to people if they had to pay an arm and a leg to get clean water. But, we don't regard health care that same way. We kind of feel like, well, if you get sick and you can't pay for it, oh, well. Well, first of all, I don't agree with that. I think that sounds heartless. But second of all, if you think that people who get sick, first of all, just won't get any treatment, you're mistaken. And if you think that you won't end up paying for that treatment somehow, you're mistaken. So it's in everybody's best interest for as many people as possible to have good health care. But you can't get some people to agree with it. People say, it's socialism, it's whatever. That's what I heard at the town hall. But
I feel like there's a big part of this conversation that sort of gets passed over is the cost part of it. There is a healthcare cost problem in this. I have been saying this for the last month. I went to Geneva General for my broken hand. I went to the doctor several times after that, and you get the bills, and you get these itemized bills, particularly if you go visit the ER. And it's amazing, the numbers. Like, I understand that an x-ray machine is an incredibly expensive piece of machinery.
Right.
But I also understand that there are most likely, they're using that machine hundreds of times a day, even the smallest of hospitals. And the per-use cost doesn't seem to equate to what the piece of machinery is probably worth and what the service winds up costing. And you're in an ER for, 45 minutes and you've racked up a $4,000 bill. And and thank God for insurance, because insurance comes in and saves the day. But it's just one of those really bizarre things to me. Like I have trouble, and maybe someday someone will show me a manual or some sort of textbook that outlines why everything costs as much as it does in the health field.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen any good evidence yet.
Yeah, I don't want to defend their billing practices, but I can say with certainty that the part of the economics of healthcare is building in cost recovery for people who can't pay. So if people think that somehow a good solution is just a free-for-all, if you can get it, you can get it, and you can't, and they think that somehow that's protecting their assets because then they won't pay for someone who doesn't have coverage, they just don't understand how business works, because the business of a hospital will cover its costs, and that means you will pay more even if you're covered to take care of the people who are not. And somehow that gets missed in the discussion. So,
all right, so we're going to move on to another. I just mentioned Geneva General Hospital, so now I'm going to jump right to the other Geneva issue that we have on our plate tonight, the Guardian Glass pilot agreement. Yeah. Go ahead. I know you have a little bit to say about this, so I'll let you go first this time around.
Well, I'm not sure how to frame this because they already approved it.
Yeah, we're looking at this after the fact. It's already been done. It's been approved. 2 public hearings were held.
Yeah.
I believe, if I recall correctly, the pilot was said to secure, I want to say, like 140 jobs. ish or something like that, potentially.
Right. Well, and that's always debatable. How people count jobs and how many jobs are related to what incentives. I think that is actually a very imperfect science. So I never trust those numbers because they don't seem to have a well-honed expertise behind them.
Right.
It's just kind of somebody writes, we need this money or we'll have to cut this many jobs. And there's no vetting or verification of that. There's no independent analysis. It is just you kind of take their word for it. So Guardian, when they first came in, which if anybody wonders how long ago that was, it was well before I was on council, and I was on council for 16 years. So it was a very long time ago that Guardian came in and got their first pilot agreement. And this is their general operating procedure, right? They go from community to community when a pilot expires or when they challenge an assessment and a community gets nervous that they're challenging their assessment, which is what happened here in Geneva. They offer a new pilot agreement. Mm-hmm. And there are some questions I still have that were unanswered about portability of the tax incentives. So as you know, Guardian has been purchased by Koch Industries, and there are several Guardian facilities that are up for sale on the Guardian website that have features similar to the Geneva plant. And some of those are being offered with newly negotiated pilot agreements. Mm-hmm. So I do wonder if this Geneva pilot is portable in such a way that it would allow them to sweeten the deal when they actually do sell. Because, I mean, their business plan when they first came in was operate for about 20 years. That's about the life of the furnace. And then they start shopping around for other locations. So they play one community off another to get the best deal.
Right.
Now, it was said over and over in city council, we weren't going to play into that. We understood that this industry, if they stay, if they see the benefit of staying, great. If they don't, the time of Geneva's economic development hinging on a large industrial manufacturer is gone. That is not the way we want to be building our local economy. It's not durable. It requires too much public investment. But it wasn't City Council's decision to make, and the face of City Council has changed quite a bit anyway. So it was the City Industrial Development Agency. And historically, industrial development agencies are populated by and hold the general philosophy that bigger ticket items are better for local economies. And I don't think they've necessarily caught up to the Rust Belt economics of what actually builds a sustainable economy in terms of small business development versus big impact. Mm-hmm. So the fact of the matter is, I think the pilot agreement has done nothing to keep Guardian in Geneva. I think Guardian knew they were going to stay or not long ago, and I don't think this affects it. If anything, it could incentivize them moving if the credits are portable. But if they are going to stay anyway, I think it just gives them a better deal.
Right.
I don't think the city gains
So
by having done this.
What I had seen in the few stories that I read on this subject was that, and there weren't a ton of stories on this subject. No. It was something that sort of flew mostly under the radar.
I think everyone assumed it was a done deal. Unfortunately, I hate to say it that way, but I think I don't think anyone thought it wouldn't be approved.
The company said that they needed the new agreement to continue investment in the facility.
Right.
So
Isn't that what you would say?
I really, yeah, right. I mean,
I need this money because I need it. I mean, you wouldn't say, I just like this because I'd like to pay less.
Yeah, I mean, my problem with that sort of scenario is that you get into you can just keep going back to the well, right? Over and over and over again.
Yep.
And I don't know if this is really, I'm not a huge fan of IDAs in the first place in terms of what they just do on a flat out basis. That said, if it keeps them there, great. But my other concern about, you talk about a potential sale and what that might do to the business itself. Well, the next person who comes in isn't married to Geneva.
Right.
Guardian or the parent company of Guardian Koch can promise that they're going to stay.
Yeah.
But then if the next company that buys this particular plant chooses to shut down operations here and move somewhere else,
right,
for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think these IDAs forget that they actually could negotiate in these arrangements. I mean, why not say, okay, you can have a pilot. We're inclined to give you a pilot for 20 years. And if you leave before the 20 years is over, you're going to have to pay back X percentage because it's conditional on that. Or we're going to require yearly accounting, an audit of your employment records. And if we find you're not employing enough Geneva people, you're going to pay X amount of dollars back.
That's the big sticking point for me in terms of, generally speaking, the whole idea behind generating employment, because that's what this really boils down to. It's not just the money. It's actually more the people that the money is buying.
That's the argument, yes.
So I feel like there needs to be better accountability with that across the board. Now, my big issue with this particular item, and we had talked about it before we came on here, we had that huge snowstorm last week, the day that the original public hearing was set to take place. It was set to take place at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday, and we get the biggest snowstorm of the entire year. And I'm publishing some stories. It's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I shoot an email out to a couple people in Geneva to see, is this still happening? Are you guys still doing this? And the answer was a resounding yes, we're still doing it. And if anybody wants to get their comment in, you have to send an email to City Manager Matt Horn before 6 o'clock if you want it to be on the record. Okay.
Right.
I didn't go back to see what the turnout was like that night. I assume some people managed to get there.
I don't know. I don't know if anybody came to the original meeting. That's a good question.
So, and then a day or two later,
did they
I think it was the next
state
day,
of emergency to travel on the roads to get? I don't know.
Well, and then a day or two later, they scheduled the second public hearing.
Right.
And if there was a silver lining out of the entire thing, I was at least happy that they scheduled a second public hearing.
Yeah.
Because it is one of those things. Whenever I cover the IDA down here in Seneca County, and one of the things you always see, people don't attend their meetings, but when there's a public hearing on a pilot, you always get some people participating. You always get some people out. And I feel like when you get into a scenario where you have this unusual or catastrophic event happening, and you still keep this event going. And in the moment, it looked like the only time this event was going to take place was this singular public hearing. You discourage people, I feel like, from even wanting to participate. And it goes back to this greater discussion of what we were talking about earlier, where you just don't, if you break the will of the people, why do you think you get 20 people turning out to vote? And,
Yeah, that's scary because it makes you think, well, maybe that's the intent. Maybe the intent is to tell people that their ideas don't matter. But I hope not. I hope that's not the intent, because that would be really terrible.
Well, and here's one of the things that I always think. It's like the person who's living it, or the person who's actually, I'll say like the officials in Geneva, they're looking at it, they're saying, well, yeah, it's snowing, it's bad outside, but we have to be there, so we might as well just let the show go on. Yeah. And I think that it's just a kind of like casual oversight, like, oh, it's not that bad. We can still do this. We can still get it done. I don't think there's an intentional deception, but that's the way it feels, and that's the way people react to it after the fact. I feel that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I guess my biggest problem with the whole process was that there's no creativity. There's no one is able to say the purpose of this offering incentive at all is to secure these outcomes. And here's how we'll verify them, check up on them. Here's how we'll tag, like I said, payback, in penalties if they don't follow through. It's just, oh, you say you need the money, otherwise you're going to leave. Okay, here's the money. And that, I just feel like, who negotiates like that? You're holding the cards. So So set your terms that are best for the community, and you don't have to play by their rules when they're coming to you with a request. You can actually say, these are our community standards, and we're a governing body that's going to enforce those standards. But it's like people fold in the face of guys in suits making demands. That's my feeling.
I've always been one to think that you have a lot of, when you look at, I'll call it small-time politics, when you look at the local politics, I feel like you get into a scenario where you're talking about part-time politicians, and ultimately how much responsibility they're doing a community service by running and by participating in the first place. You're putting an even greater burden on them by telling them essentially you're bargaining for these multi-million-dollar deals. No pressure or anything, but enjoy that $9,000 salary.
Yes.
Thanks a lot for your hard work.
Yeah.
And
9,000.
what do you
on city council? We got 4.
Right. So
a year.
what do you really expect to get out of that? If those, you're putting these people at this table and make them work for it, but make that work worthwhile.
But that's why public meetings and getting out there and being more transparent is helpful, because there are people in the community who want to help come up with solutions. And if they're asked and if they're invited to the table and if their ideas are taken seriously, not that they have to be followed all the time, but if it just, like you said, if it's not just like, oh, yeah, there's, 3 feet of snow, but come down anyway. Yeah. If it's actually, you know what, we want to come up with a creative solution. We'd love to hear your ideas and see if any of them are workable. We're going to reschedule. Then you take some of the burden off the individuals in these seats, because then, yes, they make the final decision, but they have help. They have people willing to do some of the heavy lifting. Right. So I do think it has to be a collaborative process in that way. And unfortunately, there ends up being this kind of line in the sand where the decision makers want to be left alone. And that's a recipe for bad policy.
So our last 2 topics of the night are they're lightweight, but they were things we couldn't let go.
Yeah, okay.
So first, keeping on the vein of the turnout issue, Assemblywoman Deborah Glick of Manhattan proposed a $10 fine
penalty
for any registered voter who didn't vote.
Right.
It's a proposal. It'll never go anywhere. Right. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to basically throw the question to you. Is that viable?
Well, I mean, viable as a proposal? No, because you're right. Nope, everyone's already said they wouldn't vote for it. The League of Women Voters said they couldn't see themselves endorsing it. And if you can't get the League to endorse it, it's not going anywhere. But, the idea, and I will say, though, it did provide exemptions, just like jury duty. Right. So... But the idea is kind of neat because, like jury duty, if you get a summons in the mail, you have to answer. You can't just say, oh, I know this is my civic duty, but I choose not to. So it is kind of a neat idea. I'd love to see them, maybe not a penalty, but I wish there were maybe an element of shame that, you get a sign in your yard. This person doesn't care enough about democracy to vote if you didn't show them.
Incentivize.
Yes. So, or, an incentive. Although, I don't know. You shouldn't have to get paid to do the right thing. But
so my really sort of 500,000 feet above the situation look at it is that she released a statement afterwards, said she was happy that she created a legitimate conversation around the subject, which I think is cool. It is something worth discussing. That said, I don't know. My look at it was, wow, $10?
Yeah.
$10? Every dollar counts, especially with, working families, and I get that. But at the same time, when you're throwing out a proposal to wow people, $10 is what you come up with.
Yeah, she should have come out and said you get a $1,000 fine or 3 days in jail if you don't vote.
Right,
yeah.
Something. Yeah. So I think it's ridiculous. I would never, ever, ever in my wildest dreams, I wouldn't even support something like that.
Yeah.
Because it's getting engagement the wrong way. It's just like incentivizing it.
Yes.
Instead of handing them a $300 check, you're basically threatening them, forcing them to come out.
Yeah, but why can't we have a real conversation about making it easier for people to vote? Voting by mail. I'm not sure about online voting because, maybe voting by mail is just as insecure. But, there's got to be better ways. Give people the day off work. There's an incentive to go vote, right? If you get the day off and the polls are open reasonable hours, then you should feel guilty if you're enjoying a day off and haven't done the thing for which the day off was granted, Yeah. I don't know. There's got to be ways to get more people to vote other than just hoping that their heart speaks to them to be good people and responsible.
I'm a big supporter of the idea that if we can't get people out to vote and the day is the problem, then we need to open it up to more days.
Yep.
It would be expensive, and I get it. I know I've talked to some elections officials who they don't think it would be that much of a benefit. They don't think it would actually change the turnout that much. I just think making it more available is never a bad thing. Right. It's doable. That at least helps people get out. And maybe you get people maybe 5% more than what you get right now.
Right.
That's better than what we get right now.
I can't tell you how many people the day after elections say, wait, that was yesterday? Yep, that was yesterday. Now it's over. Now you've missed it.
Yep.
But,
So, and then another one of the interesting political stories, and you just got introduced to this one yesterday or today.
Yeah.
Tompkins County is weighing the possibility of raising the legal age to buy tobacco.
Yeah, I didn't know about this till you mentioned it, so it was news to
and
me.
I will say this: a big shout out to the Ithaca Voice for publishing the story. That my first exposure to this was through a story that they had published. So kudos there. I think it's bizarre. I don't like the idea of a county going, if the state were to do it, or if the state were going to say, this is what we're going to do and we're going to do it this way. I would rather see an agency like that has sort of overwhelming rule make a decision like that rather than a county do it.
Well, it's interesting. It kind of goes back to our Medicaid discussion, right? If we actually want to bring down the cost of health care, Medicaid or otherwise, why wouldn't the state say we're going to raise the age that you can buy tobacco? Because let's look at one of our primary drivers of healthcare cost across the country, and it's smoking-related illnesses. So, I mean, sure, make that more difficult. But, yeah, I mean, I looked it up. I didn't realize that other counties around New York State have done this. Some in Long Island, New York City, I guess, all the boroughs have done this, and Cattaraugus County, which kind of surprised me, Cortland County. So apparently this is making its way around, but only 2 states have actually done it so far, California and Hawaii. But maybe New York State will follow suit at some point. I don't know.
So I think one of the interesting things that I've heard after reading this story is people saying, well, this is good because the cost of healthcare is high, and smokers are contributing to the cost of healthcare. Yep. Smoking has been declining since 1965. The rate of smoking has been declining since 1965. I didn't know this until 2.5 weeks ago. I had another reason to look up this set of statistics. And across the board, whether it's in young people, students, and then the other body, the rest of humanity that they weigh, it's declining. It's been declining every year.
Yeah.
And a bunch of years back in the early 2000s, New York State went to a no smoking in public spaces, so like restaurants and things like that. And I'm sure that helped continue to drop the numbers, but it's below 20% now. And it's one of those things that I feel like in another 20 years or so, and I know everybody wants to find a solution to our problems right here and now, but you're not going to make everyone stop smoking by raising the age to 21. And I feel like like I say, give it another 20 to 30 years, I feel like you're going to be talking about an even smaller percentage of the population.
Yeah,
and,
I hope so.
I mean, it seems to be pretty universal at this point that everyone understands that smoking is bad, right? So I'm not really sure this type of mandate or this type of law is really necessary when it comes right down to it.
Yeah, I don't know what the impact is. I mean, you could argue that were it not for making it more difficult, you wouldn't have seen those declines. And in that way, this, making it more difficult to purchase tobacco, might have an impact. But I think, removing tobacco ads from stuff that kids can have access to, I think that helped. There are a lot of things. But I think it's, I'm not a smoker. I don't, I don't really see the point in that. But people will pick their poison, so I guess it's not. But as far as it being a countywide thing, I agree with you that it seems to me like it should be a state issue to decide and enforce.
Right.
But,
and it seems like with all of the issues and all of the things that counties have to deal with already,
right.
Why would you want to add another thing on top of that?
Yeah.
And you're kind of putting a burden on businesses. And it's just, there are so many moving parts in a situation like that.
I am a fan of general kind of uniformity of big public policy issues. I think should be determined. I don't. Well, I'm not a fan of leaving national issues to the state, and I'm not a fan of leaving state issues to the counties. I think that they should be in their properly high up jurisdiction.
Yeah. So I mean, you get into a scenario where essentially you've created the county can make one rule, the state has their own rule,
right? And
then a neighboring county can make a different rule. Another county could say 24 years old, or maybe they say 19
65.
years old, or whatever the case may be. It gets into this really bizarre place that I don't really feel like makes any sense for anybody. That said, hits and misses for the week.
Okay. Let's see. My hit for the week. I'll make my hit and miss kind of the same thing. I said it was going to be healthcare, but I think we've already talked about that. So my hit for the week would be the Attorney General Eric Schneiderman picking up Preet Bharara's top prosecutor and hiring him, because that makes me optimistic that the good work will continue.
Right.
My miss, aside from Preet Bharara being let go, I guess would be, it is the healthcare thing. I think it's a cynical move on the part of Republicans who are desperate to get this to pass, even though they know the Senate version is going to undo most of the stuff they're putting in, so it's not even going to end up being what they say it is. I don't like it. It's plain politics. It's the exact thing I think people were hoping they were getting rid of, but it's just same playbook, different team.
So, my hit for the week, I'm going to totally change from what we had talked about earlier. People who came out and voted yesterday in those village elections. Yeah, I know there were probably only a couple dozen of you per village, but you know what? I'm really happy that you guys did go out and vote, because it is important, and it is something that we harp on constantly on shows like this and podcasts. We're always talking about this. My miss for the week is the whole story around the Richmond town supervisor in Ontario County, Nathan Van Bortle. He's accused of taking records from his employer, the Canandaigua National Bank. The reason why I'm calling it a miss is because if he's found to be guilty or found to have done something wrong, it's a miss for the community. But then if this is found to be, if he's innocent, if he did nothing wrong, his personal brand, his reputation, and his status as an elected official takes a hit that is, it's undue. It's not right. Yeah,
and it's not easily overcome.
And it's one of those things, like, there is no easy scenario there. There is no easy way out to say, if you have evidence that somebody did something wrong, you have to act on it. I get that. But it puts everyone in a really bad spot in that particular community right now. But that's that. As always, I'm going to say anybody who has any feelings about the things we've talked about today, send us a comment on Facebook, comment on YouTube, wherever you want to comment. It's all good stuff. That said, like our brand new Facebook page. We will be back on April 12th. That's a Wednesday. It's the second Wednesday of April. Hit that subscribe button if you are checking us out on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and we will be back in 3 weeks.